Welcome to this really terrific opportunity to have a conversation about a pressing moral and ethical challenge for every citizen of any nation, of any country at this moment in our life collectively. You don't have to be much of a reader to see in the news the striking juxtaposition between humanity and nation, between the aspirations of what dreamers bring to their political life and to the fact of deportation that in fact is pretty much constantly in the news and is at the heart of problems like family separation at the US-Mexican border. So I'm really glad you're here. My name is Gunther Peck. I'm the director of the Hart Leadership Program. I'm a professor of history and also a teacher of ethics in the public policy school. What I'm going to do before I introduce our terrific guests, I do want to just offer a few words of thanks and then frame a few comments for you about why dreamers and why deportation as the theme for this convening. So first, I do want to thank the many people who are part of creating this forum, which include Maria Elena and also Emily for getting the AV together, getting the stage built. I want to thank Define America, the student organization who is a key collaborator in actually coming up with the format and the idea to convene this conversation about deportation and rights. I want to thank Judith Kelly, my dean at this school, who's been very supportive of these conversations. I also very much want to thank two people who have been working with me really since we first talked about this. Maria Pacheco, who's the program coordinator of the Hart Leadership Program. And I'm sorry I'm going to embarrass you, Maria, but you are a force and a great teacher, a great coordinator, a great organizer. And she is going to be moving on next year, but we are in your debt. Thank you so much. And of course, Elizabeth Austin, who at every stage of this process has been an equal, if not greater force in getting things done. And I thank you so much. So, all right, dreamers and deportation. Let me just say a couple words about them and give you an overview. I'm going to spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes speaking. I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful speakers. And then they'll both take 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to let them reflect on what they've heard. And then we'll open it up to the audience. And I will be the moderator of that. And I will only ask that you, if you are going to make a comment, that's fine, but that you also ask a question and not only have a comment, but that you, in fact, bring it to the conversation, which is what this is for. So, dreamers, context. For those of you who don't know, if you're in my immigration history class, bear with me. But for those who don't know, the dreamers are a remarkable group of young men and women who, I suppose, owe their immediate origin to Chuck Schumer. That's a weird way of putting it, but he was the Democratic senator who initially proposed a DREAM Act, which would have given citizenship status to young men and women who were not born in the United States, but who came here with their parents and were fully sort of part of American high schools, American communities, and really any sense of what we would consider being an American, they are American. And so the DREAM Act, which has not been passed, although it's supported by a majority of American citizens today, would in fact create that path to citizenship and would enfranchise millions of undocumented people in the country. Dreamers are more than that, though, because they also have taken the story of what the DREAM Act has proffered and really turned it into a narrative and opportunity to get citizens to reflect deeply, creatively about what being an American is, about why the nation matters. Really what Dreamers have done in many ways is to lead the nation, even though they're not citizens. And I think one of the questions we'll be hearing about and thinking about is what the relationship is, what the stakes are that citizens and non-citizens share. What is it that brings them together, as well as, in this case, what, of course, is dividing them. It's part of an ongoing conversation we are fomenting at Hart Leadership, which is to think about youth leadership over the course of this year. And Dreamers are some of the best examples I can think of a group of men and women remarkably courageous who have changed the national conversation far better than any politician or political leader, so-called, has done. Deportation. Why deportation? So just to quickly frame that as the sort of oxymoron behind this event, Dreamers and deportation. Deportation is not new. Family separation is not new. The storyline that we've been seeing a lot about that has really struck many people and cut to the heart of what this nation means when you see families being separated physically, violently at the US-Mexican border, is itself a result of a longer-term policy that we must acknowledge. And I just want to frame that really quickly. Deportations are the context in which Dreamers, in a way, have found their voice by trying to advocate not only for themselves, but for their families. So deportations, without giving the long history of them, have increased inexorably over the past 2 decades. Family separations have increased inexorably over the past 2 decades. If you're a good Democrat, let me puncture your bubble. You probably already know this, but it was under President Obama that deportations reached historically unprecedented levels. And more importantly, that family separations really kicked into high gear. I'll give you one quick number. In 2005, under then President George Bush, there were 1,290,000 apprehensions by ICE. And of those good men and women, 246,000 were deported that year, so about 1/5. The next year, a new unspoken law, or rather procedure, came into being called 287G. I apologize for those of you in my immigration class, you've heard me say this. 287G allowed local law enforcement to be deputized by ICE to, in effect, expand the efficiency by which local law enforcement could deport men and women, a routine traffic stop. Men and women who are here, many of them, most of them, came legally and then overstayed visas, did not break any law except overstaying their visas. So another thing happened at the same moment that 287G became sort of instrumentalized in 2006 is the effort by a group within both parties, but especially in the Republican Party, Tom Credo, to make all undocumented people felons. So if you've ever trespassed, ever, in a golf course like many of my students, or just for fun in someone's pool, you're now a felon. That radically expanded the capacity of law enforcement to deport people. And what you see then is an expansion in deportations, and that has meant family separations, because many of the people who are being deported are parents or children, but mostly it's parents who are then separated from their kids. So just to give you a quick number, the number of apprehensions dropped by 2012 from 1.2 million to 640,000, but the number of people deported went from 246,000 to 419,000 in 2012, which meant that the work of the law enforcement was far more, if you will, ruthlessly efficient in deporting people. And the number of people who were separated from their families grew as well. So by 2012, 419,000 deportees, 210,000 citizen children lose their families or have to choose, either become an orphan in this country by staying here or have to go into exile as a result. The conversation, and I'll wrap up, the conversation about birthright citizenship that we see at the heart of the political controversies today, the 14th Amendment, those rights for citizen children have been under assault for more than a decade. Because for a citizen child, you have to choose between being a citizen in the country you're born in or staying with your mom and dad. So that's how we are in this situation. There is a kind of massive policy failure, I would say. Or maybe it's the way policy is supposed to work, we can debate that. But that undocumented people face choices that no one wants to face. And it's in that context of a kind of terrifying choice that dreamers are especially powerful in changing the narrative and asking questions that ask us to rethink what the nation is, who the nation is, and why we matter together. So I will now stop talking and introduce our wonderful presenters. So unfortunately, Maggie Loredo, the first presenter, who I'm not Maggie, but I'm sitting in her chair. I was supposed to be standing over there. Maggie will be getting here later. She was detained briefly at customs and missed her connecting flight. And there is the sort of border in a nutshell. She will arrive, but unfortunately not in time for the panel. But let me tell you who Maggie is and why she was here. Maggie is born in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, and she immigrated to the United States with her family at the age of 2, and she was forced to return to Mexico upon high school graduation in 2008 because she could not go to college. She's been living in Mexico for the last decade. In 2014, she contributed with her experience on a book called Los Otros Dreams, co-authored by Jill Anderson and Nin Solis. She's been an active spokesperson for deportees and returnees in her community in Mexico, and she is currently a director of Otros Dreams and Accion, and as a group that has really been representing the rights of deported people in Mexico, as well as back in the United States. So I'm going to introduce, and Maggie will be coming, if you are staying for the dinner later, you'll get a chance to meet her. Adriana Figueroa is our next speaker, is also a returnee born in Mexico City and raised in New Jersey. She immigrated to the United States at the age of 5 and returned to Mexico when she was 18, mainly to continue her education. She is the oldest of 3 siblings and the proud daughter of Victor and Alejandra Figueroa. She is the first in her family to go to college and has a bachelor's degree in psychology from the Universidad de las Americas, Puebla. She has been an EMT for the past 4 years with the Mexican Red Cross. Currently, she is living in Cancun, Mexico, working as an addiction counselor and paramedic. It took 12 years before she could reunite with her family and visit them in the United States. She was granted her tourist visa this past December, and this is the second time she's been on U.S. soil since she left the United States at the age of 18. Axel Herrera is a third-year student here at Duke University, a double major in economics and sociology, and a Golden Door Scholar. He is a DACA recipient from Honduras who came to the United States in 2005. Last year, he was involved in establishing the Duke Define American chapter on campus that brings together undocumented immigrants and allies in order to provide support and a platform for organizing on and off campus. He has lived in North Carolina for over 13 years and has been in Durham for 6 years. He graduated from Riverside High School in Durham, where he was heavily involved in advocacy. You're also an engineer then, and organizing movements in the community during his junior and senior year. So let me welcome these 2 speakers, and I will, let's give them a round of applause. And we can go, do you want to go first? We didn't decide this, but yeah. Okay.
Hello. Thank you so much for the invitation and for this opportunity to be here with you. I'm very excited. Like Dr. Peck said, this is my second time back in the US. It's kind of cold. And just having this opportunity is kind of a surreal experience because I could very well be one of you sitting there. Just the circumstances were a little different. It's important for me to represent, and by the way, let me just say, I do apologize. Maggie would have loved to be here. She told me, please apologize because, you know, I wouldn't want to be there. She's going to come in a little bit later, but I'm representing, Maggie and I are representing the other dreamers. Oh, that's why it's called Otros Dreamers in Action, right? We're representing the people that were not able to have DACA status under President Obama. We're representing all the people that were deported or returned like I did, not necessarily by choice, but by circumstance. And what we do in ODA is fight still here and there for our right to be seen. Because to me, and what I want to share is that I was undocumented in the United States, but oh surprise, when I went back home, I was also undocumented because it's a whole another story trying to get your papers again and saying, hey, I am a Mexican citizen and I studied. Can I validate my my high school degree, or can I go to college here? So what we do is we help other people who under the same circumstances in Mexico. And I want to say that we are here. The Dreamers recently, I would say, got a lot of attention, and it's a lot of, I would say, went into mainstream because we were always here. But I think just recently we were visible. And this type of events, this type of panels are the reason why. You guys are the reasons why, because people like you are interested in changing the world and changing policy and have maybe experiences with friends who are dreamers, friends who are undocumented or have a similar situation. So it's because of you that I'm here, and I want to just thank you, first of all. Thank you for being here, listening to my story and to Axel's as well. Like Dr. Peck said, I was born in Mexico City, but I was raised in the United States. I really did not know a lot about Mexico, besides what in the household there was, you know, with speaking Spanish with your parents and so forth. But Mexico as a country, I did not know until I went back and I actually started discovering my own country. But I didn't feel 100% identified there. And in here, you know, with being an undocumented person, you're very well also in exile in the place that you're living in, which is kind of sad, but it empowers us to do something about it. There's no other way but to raise our voice, because it's the only thing we have. When we can't vote, when we can't have the same rights as the people we're living with, our neighbors, our friends, we can only raise our voice. So that is what we do. We try to help people get their documents in Mexico, because when you're there, you don't know anything. You don't know about healthcare, where to get it. You don't know about where to look for a job, how to look for a job, what rights you have. So all that is based in Mexico City. We have a cultural center now. We just recently got, it's called Pocha House. We're very proud of it. And Pocha, why? Because I don't know if you guys know what the word or the context of Pocha, if anybody's been called the Pocha here before, you understand. But it's technically what in Mexico they call a person that doesn't speak 100% Spanish or very fluent Spanish or speaks Spanglish, no? So it's a way to identify us. We are taking that word back in a way, because before it was sort of like the spectrum, oh, you're pocha, you know. And we took it back, and it's a safe space where other people like us can go and share our experiences, share our culture, because we are sort of like a subculture. In Mexico, they don't celebrate Thanksgiving, but here, living for 13 years, well, Thanksgiving was just part of every holiday every year. So we just celebrated it on Saturday, and it's those type of things that we try to promote. We try to promote different workshops for people. Therapy is also an important part, because there is PTSD in a way. Maggie couldn't be here because of customs. When I was coming through customs just today, I can share with you that it was sort of a heart-wrenching experience. Like, am I going to be able to, am I going to be able to come? I have to show this document to say that, hey, I have permission to come and to speak with all of you today. So we try to work with people that need counseling because of all those experiences that we had. Family separation is real. I was not able to see my family for 12 years. I'm not able to hug my dad for 12 years because my parents are undocumented. That's why it was important for me to mention them in my bio, because they're the reason I'm here. They're the original dreamers. They had the dream to come to a country to have a better life for themselves and for their children. So to me, they are the original dreamers, and because of them, I am here. And because I have this visibility, it's important for us to represent our parents as well. And I think I was listening in the class about, with Dr. Peck's immigration class, and they were saying that why was it important for the children of DACA to not, for the DREAM Act, not to pass right away, because it's important for our parents to also be recognized. DACA is just for the deferred children of the children like me that came here when we were young, undocumented, but not for the parents. And it's important because we are a family unit. Everybody has family. It's important in our society. That's what we thrive on, connections, So it was hard not being able to see them, they not being able to come to Mexico, I'm not being able to come to the United States. And thankfully, just recently I was able to come back and see them and visit them, but that's not the case for everybody. And that's what we're still fighting for, and that's what we're still trying to raise awareness, and that's why we're still trying to say that this is real. I really believe that we can make a difference just by hearing our stories, and maybe a part of it will resonate with somebody, or a part of it will say, hey, well, I can do something about it. I do have the power that maybe other people don't have, and I can represent them through my decision and my power to do it, So in all that, like I said, we do that. We also try to have family reunification programs where we crowdfund so that people can come if they're available. We try to work with lawyers that could work pro bono to try to fix this broken immigration system, that it does exist and it is real. And so we try to do that as well. That's what our work in all that is. That's what I represent, the people who are exiled, because a lot of people see and hear deportations, but what happens afterwards? So what happens when we go back? We're still there. We try to make what we do now is we try to make our country of origin a little bit better by being better citizens there, by taking, personally, what I learned from the United States that was so positive and was so good, like following stoplights. And I said, wow, they do stop here. No, in Mexico, they just go straight. So with those little things and combining the best out of two different cultures is what we try to promote and do in ODA and in Mexico. We are the other dreamers, but I think everybody here is a dreamer, and we just have to take a little bit of action to do something about what is happening right now. And for example, just recently, I don't know if you've watched the news, but there is a problem in the Tijuana San Diego border, no? And it's happening in my country. So from my perspective, from my part, we're gonna try to do something about it, because we feel so very connected to the brothers and sisters from Guatemala, from El Salvador, who are trying to find their dream and are trying to fight for their dream. And it's amazing to me, and it's part of what you were also saying, that Mexico is not perfect as well, and there is a lot of broken immigration policies as well there. So if I couldn't fight here, I'm still fighting there. We're still fighting there, so we can fix it together, because it's not just a United States problem, it's not just a Mexico problem or where any immigrant comes from, but it's a humanitarian problem. It's really, we are only one race, the human race, and we have to unite to beat this broken immigration system and to fulfill our dreams, our original dreams that our parents and so forth really wanted to fulfill. I don't know if there is, anything else that I can say, like, at this time, but it is important for us to continue with this.
Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Axel. Thanks.
It was last year that a group of us from the Define American got the first kind of encounter and a opportunity to engage with Maggie and a few others, and I think that was one of the most impactful moments out of our experience, because it's something that is relevant in our minds in regards to deportation, but just hearing the story and hearing all the challenges that people that are deported. I think that realization that we had was whoa, this is something that should always be kind of in our agenda as well, to kind of push forward. And so thank you for that. I wanted to point out something that we had mentioned before. It was that we were saying that we kind of, we're like parallels, basically. I came in 2005 at the age of 7, basically, and I've been here, it's going to be 13 or, yeah, it's around 13 years, and then you basically left in 2005 as well, so I just thought that was interesting. But, ultimately the results from our stories become similar in the sense that we end up deciding to engage, and versus in a lot of ways just having to sit with all the the weight of the situation and the circumstances. So let's see. I guess I'll share just a little bit of the background to kind of contextualize some of the numbers and policies and changes that Professor Peck mentioned. And so so I came in. I was born in Honduras, and my mother brought my cousin who was 12. My little sister, who was 3, and I was 7 at the time. And so we came from Honduras with the help of our uncle, who was here in the U.S. He was working in New York City. And so the main purpose for us coming was that my uncle had left basically around the time I was born in 98, and he had left his daughter as well. And his goal was to bring his daughter, and he trusted my mother mostly. And in the conversation about, how to come here, how to get his daughter here, he trusted her most. And then, she had talked to other family members who had made the journey to the United States. I remember sitting in on the phone call she was having about where do I go, what city, what buses and stuff. And the other dilemma she faced, during that time was, leaving everything. And potentially even leaving one of us. And my little sister was 3 and I was 7. And, that was a question that she was insanely like troubled by, because it's like, you know, how could I leave my young little daughter? But at the same time, how could I take her in this journey? The other one was how could she leave me, and then just not know what was going to happen afterwards. And considering, you know, the circumstances, and me looking back now at like the trajectories of the lives of those who, you know, of my cousins, who I remember vaguely from Honduras, the results would have been so different. And then, and really the bravery of her, and the support of my uncle was what, you know, ultimately resulted in the opportunity for all three of us kids to be brought over by, and the courage of my mother to, you know, bring us. It was like 18 days. And so, yeah, so we came. It was a long journey. You know, that's a whole other story in itself. But one particular thing that marked our journey was that when we entered in Brownsville, Texas, we crossed the border. There's, you know, a distance or amount of space where, you know, there are still a lot of checkpoints coming in. And although all through Mexico we had faked being asleep on the buses to avoid getting asked for documentation, in Texas we got taken down the buses, all our information was taken, and from that point on we had an alien number. And so that really, you know, looking back now at all those years and how it's shaped what, you know, the circumstances that we're in regards to immigration status, that point where, you know, all of our information was taken, our fingerprints and all that, that's kind of where that process started. That's where, like, you know, the looming threat of what immigration, what la migra is, you know, was kind of stamped in a way. And so, yeah, so we first got to New York, came down to North Carolina. My mom had a terrible time in New York. It was insanely stressful. And we had some family here that actually made it peaceful. We actually came to visit and never went back. So that's how much she was done with it. But yeah, so that's basically, I've grown up here in North Carolina, and it's kind of been in stages as well. My family has moved due to work a good bit around the state. And lastly, Durham has been basically home. But in regards to my story with immigration, you know, I think I was home. I was probably home just by myself. I think I remember actually like watching the election night in 2012 with Obama and Romney, because, you know, like that was kind of one of the first cycles where I was more aware of things happening in regards to immigration, where I was hearing, you know, the stuff that was being said, and then where I was like, all right, this is, you know, very relevant to what's going to happen to me. And so I very well remember that. And then soon after, or right around that time, was when DACA was announced. And, you know, in a way, I remember having so many conversations with my mom as like, oh, how this can be an opportunity, a possibility, what's going to happen. But, you know, there was this also uncertainty. It's like, wait, we don't know what lawyer, we don't know how much it costs, we don't know where to go. And then there was like this like drag as to like actually, you know, acting or jumping on into the opportunity, because there's so much you don't know about this immigration system. And one of the main things that, you know, ties back into that first point where we were stopped at the border is that it wasn't until 2014 that I actually got to apply for it that we were able to amass all the information about, you know, where we went to school, where we lived, the addresses we had, and, you know, get all that information to the lawyer, get the money for it, figure out which lawyer to do by calling family friends about, oh, where do you go? How did you go? Did you already get it? Did you get, you know, were there any issues with it? And I remember calling the office and giving them my information, and I gave them, and they asked, oh, what's your alien number? And my mother had actually, you know, stored all these papers that we had got the day of, and through like the courts. The one court that we went to in New York, it was like very old, fine paper, and we actually just recently had to find my sister's as well. And I gave them my alien number, and then they like looked up the case and stuff, and they were like, oh, you have an order of removal. And I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I've been here for, you know, at that time, like 9 years. But yeah, realizing that I was like, you know, this is something that has, you know, always been, maybe as a kid growing up in the U.S., I wasn't aware of it, but it was always marked somewhere that, you know, I was in some ways supposed to not be here. Legally and also in other ways, like socially, I think it was always enforced. So getting DACA was in a way, what it is, really, the definition deferred that. But then it was also the realization, I was like, this means something for my family, this means something for my family, because it was all 4 of us. And so that's kind of how I gained the status that I have now. And then the other bit that I want to share with you guys is like, just the transition that happened for me in high school in regards to getting involved and being engaged in the issue. Personally, I want to say that, and this is something that's very different for many other students, for some reason, maybe due to the fact that I remembered it a lot more, or just how kind of my family portrayed it, I was always very open about my status. I honestly I think as a kid, I would even make jokes about it. Humor is a coping mechanism that is used many times, and you learn that very young as well. And so I was always very open about it. I was always very aware. I remembered a large portion of the journey. It's fading more as the years go by, but so much of my family was also immigrants that even if I didn't remember my story specifically, I knew all their other stories. And so that was always something that I was very aware of. It wasn't something that was hidden, but that's not the case for many others. And so realizing that for some other peers of mine has been one of the most difficult times, because it's something that I was conscious of us, and I knew some of the barriers that I had to kind of maybe confront later on in my life. For many others, those barriers just kind of present themselves right in your face, and it's like, this is what the situation is for you. And I mean, I can imagine similar to you, kind of just knowing, a lot of this was happening for me in high school, 2012, 13, 14, earlier on in regards to the opportunities, or even just like the chances for people to either stay here, study here, were far more limited. And so that's one way, that I was much more informed, much more privileged, because, just the time and the circumstances. So going to high school, college was in my mind, and I was working on that, and I was, just working on my classes. And then I remember sophomore year, I had one teacher ask me, I need you to kind of step up. I need you to step up. And this was at the end of my sophomore year, and I was like, okay. I see what you mean. I see what you're saying. And his name is Fernando Campos. And, he left after that year to kind of work with the ESL community in general in the Durham County. But, those words of his were something that kind of just allowed me to make that choice, or take that step and say, I'm engaged. And, kind of appropriately, the year after was when we had the wave in 2014 of unaccompanied minors come into the U.S. And in regards to Durham County, Riverside High School and Jordan High School were the 2 kind of biggest ESL programs that could, somewhat sustain that population. And so I remember coming in junior year, and then just the face of like who you saw in the halls was different, because you had so many young kids coming in. And you had such a great need in the ESL department to try to tutor them, to try to engage with them, to try to, have them have a space at the school that they could say, oh, we belong to them. But, some of what you said in regards to belonging back in Mexico, I saw it on this side. Students born in the U.S., having grown up here, probably most likely U.S. citizens, saying, oh, these are, no speakies. That's the term they used in terms of not being able to speak English, or recently arrived. And, for me, I'm smack in the middle. I've grown up here, but, I'm just as much of an immigrant as them. And so that was a lot that started, gaining my focus and my energy. And we did a lot, and it was a handful of us. But I think it was meaningful for those students who were here. And, that kicked to a higher gear in senior year, where the story of Wilden and Deportation, which is personally something that is just kind of playing right now in my mind, just due to the recent events that have happened over the past week with Samuel, a father who was in sanctuary, and the process that's going on right now at this moment, because that was Wilden as well. It was coming into school, and then someone saying, this person was recently detained in one morning. And there was a mobilization of students saying, let's take it to social media. Let's do something about it. That's how it started. Then it went to, let's go to D.C. because, we have to hold some of these people in power accountable and say, you're representing us. And it's a weird type of constituency that you have to claim, but nonetheless is still there because just the fact that you're a part of the community, the fact that, your parents are working, the fact that you exist as a human being in this space, I think you have a claim to say, you should defend me. And that's what we did with some of the representatives. And Wilden was detained for 6 months. Our goal was to get him out of graduation, but that didn't happen. During our graduation, which is here in Cameron Indoor Stadium, Wilden was actually in solitary confinement. And so that was a lot of what informed like my mentality and how I approached this issue, because at that point, I was protected. I had protected in whatever, actual sense that is, but I had deferred action. And many of our other fellow classmates, I think the decision was, we have some type of weight, we have some type of opportunity, and we need to leverage that to make something happen. And, luckily the community and many others did so much for Wilden, and then that him and others as well, were able to get released. He finished school. And, one small kind of story about my first year was that Jay Johnson was probably like right here. Jay Johnson came to speak in September of my first year, and I remember one of the other community organizers asked me, hey, Jay Johnson's coming to speak. We should go. Because Wilden was also out by that time, and I remember that Wilden and I, another, were sitting right there waiting, and then we had two other teachers had some banners, and then they just listed out the names of all the young students who were still in detention. And we asked, Jay Johnson, and in a moment that, was small and then was just all of a sudden, but still had an impact and significance in saying to the system, to the authorities, we need to hold you accountable for what has happened, for what had happened to this individual and to many others. And, we actually got the opportunity to speak, but by that point, I think it was, that was fall 2016, a lot was going to change. Which we weren't aware about, but our goal was to say to that administration, there's so much that is happening in our community, so many people are being hurt, so many families are being hurt, and it's unjust. The stories that Wilden had about being in detention, about being in solitary confinement, about these private detention places are insane, especially for youth. It's something that is unacceptable, but yet happened nonetheless. And many times because it doesn't come to light in the media. It doesn't come to light in the conversations. It doesn't come to light, within the conversations with your friends. And it's so easy sometimes for people to dismiss these things that, if it doesn't happen to you, those around you, you never take action in changing that. And so for me, that experience was what shaped what we've kind of tried to work on during our time here at Duke. I mean, I came in and, there were a lot of students from Duke that may or may not engage to some degree in immigration or in the community. But personally, I felt that, that experience was what was informing what I wanted to do, what I wanted to focus on. And so when, the crosshairs turned to us on September 5th, which is something that, it was a shock, it was frustrating, it was something that produced a lot of anger, a lot of anxiety and uncertainty on people, but it's not something that we weren't expecting. The reason that my sister doesn't have deferred action is because all we would hear in these, primaries was like, cut this, immigrants this, and then all this negative stuff, all this xenophobia that was already kind of coming up to the surface. And so a lot of the students at schools weren't sure what to do, weren't sure what they wanted to do. In regards to my personal my family, we weren't sure if we wanted to apply or, risk that. And so when it happened, it was, I guess for me personally, it was something like, yep, this is it. Mm-hmm. And so what we did, many of us who actually are now involved in Define American, were there that day. And I very clearly remember that, about 2 people felt like they wanted to, they felt sure about speaking up, because at that point, there's not really any, they didn't feel that same protection. They didn't feel that same valor that say, oh, I'll be okay even if I speak. And then it was great to see that what you said, your story is kind of, your voice is sometimes all you have. And similarly, one things that I've believed is that what I have authority of is the most is my own story. And it was great to see in that moment people, one after the other, after hearing someone else's, step up onto that bench and say, I'm going to speak, I'm going to say something. And it was back to back to back. And that was in itself amazing because it was you could just see the empowerment go from one individual to the other. You could see the courage in them like kind of step up. And they were scared. A lot of us were scared. Yes, you could see it. You could see the legs shaking a bit. But, but it was nonetheless something where we took action. And so from then on, we've worked a lot on campus to kind of just challenge some of these. And the name is Define American ? Because how are we defining, who is worthy, who's able to come in, who's able to go and leave, who is, and this is something we grappled with a lot in regards to our parents, and that's something I kind of detested from the onset is no, you cannot claim that, I am worthy because I guess I'm getting an education or I am younger and the other person who fought so much isn't. And right now it seems to be just like a continuous redrawing of the lines of who is worthy. And it seems to just shrink more and more. And I honestly don't even know that there's if there's an actual guide for that other than just, it seems to exclude some more and more as it goes. And I think many of us don't have an answer. And I think it's sometimes unfair for us to get asked to give a solution. But I think nonetheless, the conversation has started and should continue. And I think that's what we tried to do.
Thank you, Axel. Wow. Thank you so much. Before I open it up, let me just give you a quick moment to reflect on what I think is, among many things, extraordinary about your stories. But I guess it is about not only the power of your story or your voice, how and why you maybe would reflect on the moment when you found that voice, or what is it that empowered you, because it is, when you start thinking about the fear, Axel, not just for yourself, but for your parents. Yeah, I mean, it sort of the way we are socialized, the way I'm socialized would be to hide, would be to avoid. And what is so inspiring, and also I have to say, I think people want to know where that courage comes from. And you sort of said you had it early on, but maybe just reflect, was there a particular moment that pushed you to, not to lose the fear, but to kind of step up?
I mean, I think there's two iterations of this wave of saying, I want to act and step up. And I think one of those was Wilden and his story, and of the many others who were detained. And in that sense, I think my biggest thing was, this is how I explained it during that time, is there is not that much that separated me and Wilden other than maybe date of entry. And if anything, in regards to the story and in regards to the claim that he had for staying, for asylum, he had much more. And I couldn't sit with that and say, oh, okay, that happened. Oh well, no, I had an opportunity to stand up. And to be honest, it was two of my other closest friends who started that social media campaign. And at the time, there was a lot more going on in my personal life. And once I had the opportunity to come out and speak and then use my story to inform what Wilden's was, I said that I had to do it. And then the other one is that for the September 5th, I felt that I had nothing to lose. That if I didn't fight and stand for, in that sense, DACA, the decisions that the administration was going to do were going to happen regardless. And if no one heard what I needed to say or what we needed to say, then in a sense we were just going to get trampled over and then moved to the background of people's minds and forgotten. And so there was a chance for visibility. There was a chance to challenge what immigration means in this country, and I think we took it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, Thank you. Do you want to reflect?
Yeah, for me, thinking back right now, June 2005, when I went back to Mexico, I didn't have but my passport, my Mexican passport that my mom was able to get for me through the consulate somehow, because my mom was a very strong woman and she got things done. But when I was going back to Mexico with the decision and knowing that I might not come back because I didn't know when, if I was gonna be able to come back, the immigration officer stopped me because they checked your documentation. And he said, and I remember it very clearly because in that moment, you get a strength. From where, I don't know. But in that moment, you get a strength. You cannot break down in front of them. I broke down in the airplane afterwards, right, crying all the way back. But in that moment, he said to me, he was searching my suitcase. I don't know what for, you know, but he was searching because I think he was expecting to find something. He said, if you have everything here, why are you going back? Like, you already got here, you know, you're already here. Why are you going back? It didn't click to him. And I said, well, sir, because I can't go to college here, because I can't study here, because I don't have papers, or I'm undocumented. Well, before that, there was not the word undocumented, right? But because I don't have any papers, I cannot go to college. He looked at me very, very flabbergasted. He's like, well, what do you mean you can't go to college? You know, like, you want to go to college? You know what I'm saying? Like, if we didn't have any aspirations. And to me, I realized, you know what? There is so much ignorance around this subject that something needs to be done. Something needs to be said, something needs to be done, and we need to be educated. Because the problem with that and the DACA, the Dreamer movement, because I think it is a movement, is precisely this, like I said, to educate, to talk about it, because a lot of people didn't know. My friends didn't know I was undocumented. I applaud Axel because he said he was never afraid. I was so afraid. I was very afraid. You know, there was something you didn't talk about, like you said. Afraid for my parents, you know, afraid for myself. It's like afraid La Migra or ICE is gonna come knocking at your door. And so I was like, no, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna try to fit in. I'm going to try to pretend. And when he said that to me, and I actually said the words out loud, because I cannot go to school here, because I don't have papers, there's this document that is separating me from my dreams and from my family, I said, you know what? It's something, we have to do something. Until afterwards, I found people that were in the similar situations like Maggie, and we formed a group, and I think the strength also and the leadership comes in the group. When I see people like Axel, and in 2008 with, like I said, President Obama and DACA, is like, yes, we have to talk, we have to come out of the shadows in a way, like they said. Because if we are not visible, how are they gonna know what's going on? So that was the moment for me, when I told him and I spoke my truth and I found my voice and I was not afraid. I think that's where, like, it says undocumented and unafraid, right? That's where it comes from. When you're not afraid to say your truth is when you get the strength to be a leader in your community, in my opinion.
Thank you. Let me open it up to the floor, and we have two microphones, Maria and Elizabeth, Beth, and if you just want to just raise your hand and make a comment and a question, we welcome them, and we may take two or three if there are more than a couple, just so we can get more input. Just raise your hand if you want to. Yeah. Beth, right here.
Hi, I just want to applaud you guys for your courage. It's amazing what you do. I just had a question. So how do you respond to someone who is making an argument against immigration, but not in like the extremist, racist, like, you know, they're taking our jobs, but it's like being more practical and being like overpopulation, or like it's impractical. Like, how do you actually fight against someone who is being a little bit more reasonable? So I feel like that's a little harder.
That's great. We can take another, or we can go right, if there's not another right away. Let's go ahead and answer that. Yeah. Great question.
That's a great question. And I could tell you that I'm living it now, and I understand it now because of the situation that's going on in Mexico with our brothers and sisters from El Salvador and Honduras and from Central and South America. And I see Mexicans say, we don't have, like, we're poor. You know, we can't help you because our country is in this situation as well. We don't have jobs. We don't have food, etc. And they say this xenophobic, racist rhetoric about them and on immigration. Like, no, go back. What's going on, like I said, in Tijuana with these signs. And I say, you know what? The fact that we help them, because the Mexican government has given them, what do you call it, like some money, and they are doing something. So they're like, well, there's people, you know, starving in the streets that are Mexicans. Why are you giving it to them? A lot of the same things that we went through here, or that happened in the United States, but with us. And what I tell them is that the fact that we help them, that we give them an opportunity, does not take away from the fact that we, you know, we can also help our own people. It doesn't take away. Giving to them doesn't take away from you. Helping them does not mean, you know, you're forgotten, or you're, you know, going to be overcrowded, or there's somebody taking your job, like, so forth. So, and just going back to the humanity, they need it now. Right now, they're the ones running from the violence and the starvation. Right now, they need our help. So let's help them. That's sort of what I would say in the same context in the United States as well.
Yeah, so I can, quick response. And especially this year, and I tell this to a lot of kind of people I have similar conversation with. I love this like sense of abstract and ideological conversations that happen here on campus sometimes about immigration or about any of these like, you know, issues, because so many people come in and then they I guess they feel like they have like, you know, kind of figured out a solution, see that, you know, oh, it just the sum of like whatever thing doesn't add up, and that's why it doesn't work. And there's no grounding of the conversation. The proximity is something that like really makes people so blind, because if we talk about, let's say, for the border and what happens in these places, if we talk about the enforcement that happens in those communities, you get a very different context of what immigration enforcement looks like. If you look at the deaths that happen in the Arizona desert, in the border, crossing, the shootings that happen of these people, you get a very different sense, and what you see is militarization. When you look at the private institutions or private prisons that, you know, are amassing people, that's a very different conversation. And so when we have this conversation about like the sum of the resources and the sum of the people does not equal, like that's not something that's contextualized. That's not something that we're actually having a nuanced conversation about what should be done to resolve the issues. And going further, if you talk about the history of abuse that has happened in many of the nations of where the immigrants are coming from, that's not the conversation we're having. And so for my response sometimes is to really question like what they're basing or you know, founding their arguments on, and how much are they actually inputting like so much of this historical record and so much of the immigrant historical record in the U.S. and how the policies have, you know, excluded very explicit groups at times or very explicit populations, and just kind of challenging those things in a way through education. But sometimes that, in my experience, doesn't always help, and that's when collective, you know, organizing community, when, you know, mass callings, when calling representatives, when doing that, I guess on our end is what helps, disrupting kind of the system or the structures who are, you know, kind of have these power over decisions. But yeah, in a sense, I guess my first try is let's try to challenge this and educate you somehow. If that doesn't work, hands off.
Yeah. That's a good candid answer by both. Yeah. Other questions, comments and questions? Yeah. Let's use the mic. And if you want to say who you are too, that would be helpful. Sorry. Your name.
Well, I'm from Peru, and in Peru we're getting a lot of Venezuelans, and the language is the same. I don't think it is a fine product of the U.S. or of Mexico. It is something very human, very social, and I think when we make the connections between what is going on here, what is going on in Mexico, what is going on in Europe, and what is going on in South America, we can change the language and the narrative of immigration in general. As I said, I'm from Peru, and I saw the immigration within Peru, from the Andes to the coast, from the rural areas to the urban areas, and the language is the same. So it's the fear of the invaders, the others, and that language hasn't changed in many years. And I think this is an opportunity to revise all that kind of story and change the narrative of immigration in general, inside and outside.
That's a great comment. Thank you. Let's see if we can get other comments, questions. Yeah, right. Yeah, over here.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a student here. I had a question for Axel. I was wondering about Durham and immigration in Durham, and with the new folks who are coming in, like the new DA, and I don't know if you all have kind of a sense of what is going on in our city and what kind of needs to be done. That's something I'm kind of curious about as someone who lives here, and how to get involved if you know of specific organizations that you work for here or work with. Thanks.
Great question.
Yeah, so I've been loosely still trying to be connected with it. But yeah, there's, actually moving, I've lived in Burlington, North Carolina before here, Alamance County, which is not as friendly. And then, when you were asking a question about what motivates a lot of the experiences of issues with immigration, traffic stops, those were Alamance County. And when I lived there, that's where they happened. And so Durham, I think my whole family felt that when we came in, it was definitely more friendly, and there's definitely been progress. I think the more specific thing that I can answer to your question has been the efforts in regards to combating enforcement and deportations and stuff. The one organization that I'm familiar more with is Alerta Migratoria. I think in regards to the local government, I remember junior year of high school talking to the city council or working with the city council about a resolution for unaccompanied minors. From the city council, Mayor Schul going to the mayor's position was something that was, in regards to, for many immigrants, was something very positive. And I think there's been statements more in support that have been very assertive to the community. And recently, I believe there was a town hall, and elections happened recently. The People's Alliance has been doing some work in regards to having I'm not sure what they're calling it exactly, but maybe Hispanic or Latinx caucus within their ranks, and then that informs the conversations of who they support for positions. But in my experience here, it's always been the challenge of Durham within North Carolina. And I think, that's something that, will be an ongoing struggle, and something that, we have to continue pushing for. There are some avenues through which there can be more support, or where we can pull a little bit more in regards to the Attorney General, or, trying to hold accountable the governor. But yeah, in many times Durham has to push back a lot on itself. But there's been, even though it started at a good point, there's also been progress. And Alerta Migratoria, People's Alliance, Durham does a lot of work as well, but that's very broad.
Good answers. Other comments, questions? Two, yeah, it's right here. Come, and then.
Hi, hello. Okay, cool. So I just wanted to ask, what should, and this question comes up a lot, like what can we do to be allies? So what can people who have U.S. citizenship do to help?
Great question. Let's take that one and then one other one, because it will, if that's okay, we can do two. Yeah, Shane.
Hi. Is this on? Hi, Shane Stansbury. I teach here through the Hart Leadership Program. First, thank you both. This was an incredible story by both of you. My question's simple. It's actually for you, and I was just curious about the experience of coming back. I'm not sure when the last time you came was when you visited your father. It sounds like it was pretty recent. But I'm just curious about, so the experience of being away for so long and coming back to what is a really hostile environment. At least the rhetoric in the last couple of years has been more hostile. And to that point, I just wonder, coming in here, do you feel like it's sort of, old wine in a new bottle? Is it sort of, things that have just sort of bubbled up that you knew already existed? Or do you feel like the country has fundamentally changed? Does that rhetoric represent a more fundamental change? And I know, sort of you just got here, and 2 visits can't give you a full picture, but I'm just curious what your perspective is.
Yeah, okay.
Well, thank you so much for that question. Yeah, it's kind of hard to put into words. I think I'm still processing both times. It's hard being away for so long because you change. I changed as a person. I don't know, to be honest, when I came back the first time in February to see my father, I don't know if it was because it was the weather. I don't know if it was that, but I saw it like less bright than I remembered in a way. You know what I mean? When you're away for so long, you miss the things that are important to you so long, like the house and the lawn and so forth, and you remember it in a more grandized way. So when I came back, I was like, well, it's not that big. I remember my house being bigger. Yeah, and I thought this tree was greener, so forth. To be honest, on a more personal level, I left I have 2 younger siblings. My sister, who's 6 years younger than me, and my brother, who's 12 years younger than me. When I left, they were 6 and 12. And I came back, and I left him, my younger brother, a boy, and I found a man that I did not know. And getting to know him again has been a process, a healing process. Being back has been a healing process for me personally, for my family as well. Just talking about, gets a little bit emotional, but because it's still fresh in a way. The wounds, I don't think, completely heal, and not when the situation in the United States is the way it is, not when the rhetoric in the United States is the way it is. Like I said, I had some PTSD, to be honest, the first and the second time I came back just now, because when you go through customs, they have my fingerprints from the time I left. So when I came back, they're like, well, what, I have something here that's popping up, and it's like, okay, again, and you see, like I said, an immigration officer. So at the beginning, it was a mixed emotions. I was afraid, because I was like, well, they might not let me back in. I don't know. They made a mistake when they gave me the visa. They're like, oh, no, you have to go back. In a way, it was healing, because, like I said, with my family. Another thing was that I think, to be honest, I remembered America differently. To answer, that's what I mean when I say that the colors were not as bright. Like, I remembered America more bright, more different. And I came back and I said, well, this isn't it. This isn't what I remembered. So that was like, well, I think I made the right decision, and I'm fighting now from another position, but I'm still fighting for the same thing, in a way, yeah. And to answer your question about how to be an ally, it's very difficult, and I understand that, because you don't know how to help 100% if you're not in that situation. I just think that being present, being here is a great way to be an ally. Being the voice that I can't be. I don't know if you've known, but people with who are immigrants, like my sister was first born here. So the whole pressure of the voting and, you know, speaking up kind of relied on her, you know, like you have to, so it's a lot of pressure for her, and it's the whole family dynamic and so forth. But the best way to be an ally is just to be that voice that we can't be. It's not news that there are people who have more privilege. It's just the way it is. Being a white man in America just comes with privilege, and it's nothing that you decided because that's the way you were born. But you could use that to help other people, realizing that privilege, realizing the privilege that if you can vote, or if you are, like I said, just for being different gender and a different color, have that privilege, just being there present next to me, who doesn't have that power to vote, doesn't have that right, is the best way you can show support and be an ally. That would be my answer. Thank you.
Yeah, kind of going off of that, in regards to, you know, engaging, becoming involved and supporting and being an ally or an accomplice, yeah, you have to have a stake in the issue. I think that's the first part, and that can be, you know, it's someone that you know who's close to you, someone who you care about. But the other side is that I think my purpose in trying to have something on campus that wasn't involved with like a bigger umbrella group was that immigration in itself, it's something so vast and affects so many people across race, culture, you know, socioeconomic status, that it's something that, you know, alone involves so much work on so many different levels that you can plug in and, you know, and engage and act and do something about it, you know, almost independently of whether you are actually involved with an organization that works with immigration. It can be, and, you know, especially in regards to Duke and like the positions that people can be or may eventually end up in regards to making decisions, being familiar with this topic, knowing who it affects and how it's, you know, policy may influence or decisions in the workplace, in the education system affect things is relevant. And so I think that was the purpose of Define American, because first we have to change how people are talking about this issue. And from there, you can take what shift of mentality or framework you have and incorporate it into almost any facet of life. And for example, I mean, one of the biggest things that I've worked with, just due to my being young and you know, just still being in the, you know, getting my education, is education itself. It's like, you know, how accessible this is. And, you know, if you're working as a teacher, if you're working within the school systems, you have powers or, you know, abilities to, you know, help engage with either students who are outright neglected the right to have an education. Your story is an example, or those who kind of don't get as much in regards to workers' rights, to things that happen. If you drive about an hour and a half from here, you can go to the farm worker camps that exist in Dunn, Turkey, all of eastern North Carolina, and you can see the conditions that people live in. You can see the conditions that people are set to work in. And so that doesn't, you know, that battle you can take on from many fronts. And I think it's just having that in the front of your mind is something that's important. And the last thing I would say is that you can't just be uncomfortable with the situation. You can't just see what's happening and say like, oh man, that's terrible. Oh, and you'll condemn it and you'll make a post about it. You have to engage somehow, and you have to make that step. And what I'm saying is that it doesn't need to be, you know, coming to Define American, like, hey, I want to go to your meetings and I want to be there every time. No, or it doesn't need to be working with some political organization. It can be almost anywhere, because immigration is so vast and affects so many.
Well said. I want to take one little stab at allyship, because I think also, as a white man, who feels deeply involved and I guess what matters to me most in thinking about questions of systemic injustice, which this is to recognize that rather than our goal, for me, my goal is not to be a prisoner of identity, but it's never to ignore it. My identity matters a great deal. I don't have to worry about a police car slowing down next to me quite as much as my good friends who are citizens of color. What matters for me is my opportunity to connect to a justice project. That's a choice that every person has, what we do with who we are. And you asked me earlier, before we were all here together, and it was a great question, like, well, why do you care about immigration? And I thank you for asking me that, Adriana. I don't have a quick answer, but I would say actually it comes out of stories. It comes out of the moral witness that we do give each other. That is a kind of power that we have as individuals that is very small. It's part of what, I guess I'm a radical Democrat. I really believe in that. That's connected to rights, but it's not the same as rights. That witnessing is what we actually have to offer, which is listening, engaging by listening, by witnessing, not speaking for or silencing. And also a friendship that I have with a dear friend who may be coming later, Danny Ayala, who I've said to my students is one of the most inspiring citizens I've ever met, and he was undocumented. He became a citizen just last election cycle, a person who did not have a voice in our democracy, who registered more than 2,000 voters in 2008. That kind of passion, but also just that personality, just a friendship. He's a great person. He taught me how to do stonework, how to build stone walls, not to keep people out. So, yeah, having an open heart is what we all need. I'm sounding like an old evangelical. I apologize if that's the case, but it actually is something we practice and we develop. It's the best way to be. Not because you're better than anybody else, but because it's what I'm called to do. So that's not to praise myself and heroize myself at all, because I also, like Axel, I don't have answers. I do have questions. Like what to do about this policy of systematic family disunion is a huge one. I don't have an answer. But we have our witness, we have our voices, and that's an extremely powerful starting point. That's where we begin. So let me ask, just in our last minutes, I'm sorry if there's more questions, but if you want to, I want to give you the final word about what you think, maybe it's hard to sum it up, but like, you can't sum it up maybe, but like, what do we need to remember and know about the current challenge moving forward? And what do you hold close as you move forward? Maybe it's kind of what gives you hope, but like what do we need to see, keep in mind moving forward regarding deportation?
Do you want to take it? Question.
An untidy question.
I guess, there's, on a personal level, there's so much that has influenced kind of life or the perspective on these issues. And, the experiences that I always see kind of are tied, for immigrants really, are tied sometimes into this like story of loss. You lose your homeland, you can lose your new home, you lose family sometimes, and that takes its toll over the years. And I guess my mission in many ways is to kind of end that for my family, for myself, for many others, and it's also realizing that it didn't start with me. It started way before. it might continue way after. And, I was asked earlier this year, like, why do you fight? And I think the answer was because I need to. And, that's how I've interpreted, that's how I see it. And in many ways, it is what fuels me. It is what drives me to continue and keep going. And really, really, the biggest asset to that, position or mentality is having those others who are around you who can kind of share that load. And so going forward, I think that was the goal starting, and going forward will be as well, to kind of keep getting people on board and saying, I'll take some of this load, I'll, do some of the tasks to keep pushing back. Because personally, I'm not sure how realistic, that solution seems, or how complex and, how much time it'll take to resolve it. But I think eventually we'll get there. But you can't get there if you don't act, and then if you don't, continue. So, yeah.
I think that what we need to remember moving forward in the situation that we are right now with immigration and what we're living in the world today is that when you hear something consistently, you start to believe it. And I think right now the media, to be honest, and what we see is a lot of hate, is a lot of negativity, is a lot of stigma. For a long time, I hated the word immigrant. You're an immigrant. Oh my God, it was hard because of the taboos and the stigmas, and it's like it was something bad. If I was like something bad, and I think we're seeing it more and more, unfortunately, again. But what gives me hope is people like yourselves, and I do mean it sincerely, that give themselves the time and the open heart and the open mind to listen to people like me and Axel, and I'm sure your friends, and a lot of people have people that are very close to them, like Dr. Peck, that make them want to see change, and that motivates me personally to continue fighting and continue talking and saying my story and my truth. And even if I'm afraid when I see the immigration officers to say, no, I'm here for a purpose. And I told him, he asked me, why are you here? And I said, well, I'm going to speak at a panel at Duke University. He looked at me like, yeah, right. I said, no, yes, I am. And it gives me the strength to say, even if I'm afraid, I'm going to continue to speak and to talk, and hope that people remind that there needs to be more humanity in the world, and that we are all just brothers and sisters, to be honest. That's what gives me hope. We need to remember that we have a long way to go, in my opinion, and that we need to continue the fight, and we need to continue more than ever, because it's gotten a little worse, in my opinion.
Well said. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause.